We are so back. Stormgate is doing what Blizzard refused to. Is the video. And
got a 1.5 million Kickstarter for a game, which is nothing to sneer at, but this is a Kickstarter that isn't even needed to get the game out the door. It's a really interesting situation with Stormgate. And seriously, when you look at the history of the people behind Stormgate, it's not hard to see why, and I've obviously got a horse in this race. StarCraft 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's exactly the sort of game that Blizzard Entertainment is capable of making, but essentially was unable to make because, being an RTS, it just wasn't really capable of being that big, billion-dollar franchise that is sent.
I refuse to believe that they are capable of making it these days. I refuse to believe that. Because what Blizzard always did best is to take ideas from other games and perfect it and make it compatible for mainstream by simplifying to a degree where it's easy to learn but hard to master, and there's nothing to steal at the moment. So I really refuse to believe that they'd be able to do it.
Essentially, everything kind of had to be. This is effectively a successor game by many of the same people with modern tech, many advancements over the last 10 years of game development. It's really damn impressive. So as a StarCraft player,
where did StarCraft originate from? From Dune.
This speaks to me, and broadly for the industry, this is what we want to see. People exiting AAA, founding a studio with a clear purpose and actually being able to execute on a game. Also, there's a core stat that'll show just how on board my fellow StarCraft players seem to be with this one. And if you want to get exactly what you want, then check out today's sponsor. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Alright, CRPGs have been popping off this year, and Rogue Trader is just that. It's a part of this awesome wave.
Okay, let's see what it is.
It's a full 40k adaptation by Owlcat Games. Now, what is a rogue trader, you may ask?
It's a good
Essentially,
question.
think space pirates, but actually a lot more full Warhammer 40k. What that basically means is you have got an Imperium warrant of trade, sort of setting up your noble house. Imagine a bit of a privateer's license. So as heir to a powerful dynasty, you shall get your void ship. Its crew, of course, because it's Warhammer, that means thousands of people, and the Cronus Expanse, the sector of space.
I never really got into Warhammer.
There are Xenos to purge, resources to capture, colonies to establish, and of course, all of those foul spawn of the warp to deal with. Cults, demons, all sorts of 40k goodness. And of course, you'll do this along with a host of companions. A rogue psyker,
cool
Alderai,
Sororitas,
Sororitas, Ulfar, the big space wolf who will maul anything close up. Pretty damn cool as a tank. Of course, it's a full CRPG. Your choices will matter a great deal. And Owlcat Games have a wealth of experience making CRPGs. It's literally what their studio does. So think
it's a CRPG.
Choices that matter, fleshed out characters, deep, excellently written dialogue, absolutely full of flavor, bringing the 40k verse to life, and all with a combat system based on all that you and your companions can bring to the turn-based tactical combat. So you're leveraging your abilities,
it's probably no Baldur's
and
Gate.
the environment. And you know what? To put it simply, Rock Paper Shotgun said Rogue Trader is the first Warhammer 40k game I've played that feels genuinely epic. Yeah, the game is damn big. So check out Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader on Steam today. Add that link down below. And man, this absolutely incredible year for CRPGs is only continuing. Okay, Stormgate was announced a while back at Gamescom, I believe.
Wait, chat is saying, I saw how StarCraft 2 looked in pre-alpha. The graphics changed very little. Sorry, I gotta jump into this. StarCraft 2 early alpha. Are you kidding me? This is StarCraft 2 early alpha. This looks like StarCraft Brood War. Yeah, I'm not too sure if you're right there, buddy.
More recently then, they've had their Kickstarter. At the same time, they also had a show match at DreamHack, which was actually kind of awesome. Now, the Kickstarter went up.
I don't know if it was awesome, to be honest. Mana was a lot better than TLO and Moon. The mirror match was quite a snoozer, actually. But glad you enjoyed.
And within 15 minutes, the goal was achieved. Within 24 hours, $1 million in fan funding. And as of the time of this video, they're pretty much in and around $1.5 million. And all of this happened before, of course, they're featuring at the Game Awards, where we had Simu Liu, who was voicing one of the faction leads. And also, they basically announced that one of the ex-Blizzard guys is involved in the narrative that they're doing. So maybe it'll feel a little bit like Metzen-y, which to a lot of people they'll like, because they like Chris Metzen's work. In this case, it's not Chris Metzen, it's Mickey Nelson, but he was quite involved in, a lot of those Blizzard games.
But they said on the Kickstarter that Metzen was involved as well, right? If, we shared it, I think. So, both is right.
Back in the day. And the reasons for hype are very simple. This is loads of ex-Blizzard and ex-Command & Conquer devs. I mean, they basically, they have the blessing of Mike Morhaime. Dreamhaven did help them out a bit, at the very least. There are many reasons, of course, to be excited. Now, one of the interesting things with Kickstarters, though, sometimes those games can fail, right? The money can evaporate. Right. So here's the interesting part of the Kickstarter for Stormgate. Basically, they already have full funding up to release. I mean, you'd sort of hope so. They had a $25 million investment from back in 2022. So what the Kickstarter is essentially offering is...
Was the 25 million, though, for the company or for the game? I think that's a big difference. Because, obviously, if you fund a company, you need... Let's start at the basics, right? All the money that you have to put into the simple things like... Let's start with chairs and tables. You can't put into the game. The fridge in the studio kitchen, can't put it in the game. So that's maybe we have to look it up.
The likes of physical collector's edition, beta testing perks, all that kind of thing, and also some stretch goals for new features, a few of which have actually already been hit, stuff like a new player assist tool, weekly mutators for the PvE mode, and more. And by the way, the PvE mode, that will be interesting to get into. I've spoken to some ex-people from in and around these teams, and the stats around StarCraft 2 are absolutely...
Wait, he's going into PvE a little bit. Before that, again, doing this Kickstarter, I think he says it right, that it's not necessary to fund the game. And the perks, especially the perks that were added later, I'm pretty sure they were planned to be implemented one day or another. But maybe they can now speed things up because the money is already available to them now, instead of when the game releases or the early access releases, so they can speed things up. Same goes for the money is now available. You can put into promotional assets for when the game then really releases.
And more, and by the way,
which obviously leads to less available money when the game then actually releases. But hopefully most of the work is then done. Of the essential work.
The PvE mode, that will be interesting to get into. I've spoken to some ex-people from in and around these teams, and the stats around StarCraft 2 are absolutely fascinating. By its own numbers that it was generating, it was a nice, healthy, safe, profitable game. It just wasn't profitable enough for the bigwigs. Of course, exactly what you would expect. Yep. So essentially then the Kickstarter is kind of working as a fan buy-in thing, almost kind of like being able to purchase a founder's pack, beta access, or, included like the campaign that would have a, premium component, because the game itself is going to be free to play. And they've actually spoken about why they've chosen free to play.
For an ecosystem, it's just really smart to create something that keep the single player gamers within the game and not just the die-hard multiplayer gamers, because otherwise you just shave off 80% of your customers, maybe.
Basically for them, it's a multiplayer game, right? It's mostly a multiplayer game, and whether that is doing like competitive ladder or playing co-op, they know that having low matchmaking times is going to be very important to them. So their plan is to basically do free to play, and yes, that does mean it's a live service title. However, they're, of course, committing to do that in a way that is, you know, not full of bollocks. Overall, for a game like this, I think that's basically fair. As an example, they say that whenever StarCraft 2 went free to play, it actually doubled its players. And that can actually be paired in with the success of StarCraft 2's co-op Commanders mode, where
I would expect more, actually. Only doubled?
basically, you have all of these like big characters from StarCraft. They all have kind of like different abilities, progression, and that sort of thing. And there are the sort of rotating co-op commanders missions that you play, funny enough, in co-op. And this feature was actually the biggest one. It was the main way that people were playing Legacy of the Void. And now, of course, you think about StarCraft 2. What do you think about? You think about 1v1 ladder. No, co-op commanders was getting way more play than that. Now, obviously, 1v1 ladder is the beating heart of StarCraft. Nobody's going to say, you know, no to that. But the option of that sort of more like chilled co-op gameplay mode, that was...
I guess this raises the question, when most players are playing the co-op, why not focus on the co-op? I guess the multiplayer games create a lot more exposure and get more eyes on the game.
Was wildly popular with people. So for all these reasons, you can basically see
it's basically a marketing
about
tool.
what was going on with Legacy of the Void, which was a successful product that many people on this team were involved with, and they're essentially evolving that as they move into Stormgate. Now, as a part of that, they're doing this in Unreal Engine, but the bit that kind of matters more, it's not really the engine, it's their own set of like tools, the things that they have built within the engine that will allow them to, you know, actually execute the game. One of their headline stats is that they can support 1,000 units on screen. And actually, this matters quite a lot. Even if
that 1,000 unit on the screen with a 300 supply cap means that 3 versus 3 probably has a lower supply cap. Because otherwise, 6 players, 300 supply, there will be 1,800, right? So either they raise the bar for the cap, or the cap is different.
if we're not going to be...
It's on screen, not in game. Yeah, what if you all meet in the middle? I mean, it's the same. What's the difference? You gotta plan for the fact that everyone is using all their units.
be having 1,000 units in a normal ladder match. Well, think about modding. Think about like custom games. One of the great things about Star 2 is the custom maps, right, that people were able to make. And it's not just custom maps, you know, it's full on new game modes. Basically stuff like the StarCraft editor is like, that's basically where League of Legends and like Dota come from. That's all from Warcraft 3's map editor, right? So I remember, I cannot remember the exact name of the game, but it was one of my favorite custom games, and you would have just big squads of like hundreds of Marines. It was crazy, and the StarCraft 2 engine just couldn't handle it. So it's really...
I also think it's more than 1,000. I'm pretty sure it is. Also, I am really curious if the effect of editors is overstated these days. Because it's so much easier to create games with other programs, independent from a Warcraft, a StarCraft, a Dota, a Stormgate. I don't know if that's... Just because there was a lot of success with custom games in the 2000s doesn't mean that there has to be a lot of success with custom games in the 2020s.
Really nice then that they're actually able to do that sort of thing, because the amount of creativity that could be unleashed by their custom maps, I mean, that could be really something special. This could essentially act as, once again, a sort of platform for ongoing game development, and on that they have some very interesting plans. Now, the fighting games community also is interesting here. One of the things that's been massive in the FGC is the implementation of rollback technology, and this essentially exists to eliminate the risk of lag from gameplay despite there being high latency between players. There's many cases of essentially fan-ran campaigns and even fan-made mods to get rollback into these games to basically protect the competitive integrity of the experience. Now, any StarCraft 2 player, of course, will know that StarCraft 2 did not support LAN. It was only playable on BNet. And you would have, in actual official Blizzard tournaments, connection issues that just wouldn't happen if it was in a LAN like you would have got in StarCraft 1. And so
What? Connection issues on Blizzard tournaments on LAN? I've never heard about that. I was never a caster for one of these matches, and I refuse to believe that we need justice for Thorzane. I also never hosted tournaments like this year, maybe in Dortmund, where having a functioning LAN service would have shaved off across a weekend 10 hours of delay. No, that can't be. It can't be right.
Sometimes this could just totally scuff a game. It would need to be replayed. And especially for the competitors, like imagine if you were actually doing quite well, you know? You were kind of dominating your opponent, but there you go. Match is broken. Going to have to do a redo. That's going to be a crazy mental position for you to be in. So this is really good for the competitive integrity that, yes, Stormgate just has rollback, which is...
It's kind of funny how they went above and beyond to create something like resume from replay for StarCraft instead of adding LAN. Even though, of course, at LAN, you can always have a power outage as well, so it's good to have both. And I'm not really sure how rollback is connected to LAN, etc. It's kind of not, I think. It's still great to have. But yeah, missing LAN features just unacceptable. At least for tournament organizers. Sorry,
so sick to have an RTS. Now, thankfully, with all of this, Frost Giant are being, from my view anyway, very cautious, very open, and very realistic about
That's right.
the game. So basically, they're calling their launch kind of year zero, right? The early access year, where they'll essentially just be working out, like, how will this game be received? They'll be rolling out campaign content and that kind of thing. This is very wise for them to do. And of course, it also means that they can start to monetize the game earlier on. And this is a situation where I do think that that is a perfectly reasonable thing, given that this is a very this is a for the fans, by the fans sort of game. Just give people the opportunity to support, be honest about like what the deal actually is, and that's totally cool as far as I'm concerned. Especially because the
narrative changed a bit from the early announcement, where they said, we're going to have everything, and we're going to revolutionize everything, to a more conservative approach now. But I think it's right. I mean, you got to get out with big words at the beginning to gather attention. If you announce a game and say like, yeah, it's going to be a game, it's going to have units and a game mode as well, and, you know, you can play it. It's not gathering any attention. So I don't think that was a bad thing. And dialing it back now, slowly but steady, to, as he says, more realistical communication, it's all right.
More that they feel safe to just hone and iterate and craft that game, that is exactly what we need. We don't want a situation where they basically have to launch into a full launch, fully monetized, way too early, to the point where it actually damages the project's chance of success. So I think that's very wise. Actually, one of the major things they're going
Can you think of a game that was released too early, fully monetized, and wasn't ready for release? Maybe a Blizzard game. Maybe also a strategy game. Can't think of the name.
Have next year, I believe, is the unveiling of their third faction, because right now it's basically just the humans and the demons, but they do have another faction in the works. And obviously for a game like this, early access, betas, all of that is so damn important. I'm actually very happy to say I'm in the current closed beta. I wasn't able to play it because basically my PC is currently scuffed. I'm limited to this machine, and of course, this logo means most of your Steam library won't work. One of the awesome things that's happened though, and this is right after they did their Server Slam event, is they announced that they're actually just going to leave the servers up over through Christmas. So I am thrilled to say I will be able to play plenty of Stormgate over the break. There really was a sense of almost hopelessness whenever we basically found out that StarCraft 2 wouldn't be getting more support. And you see, there was glimmers of hope before that, because they started doing some cosmetic DLC purchases. And honestly, they did look pretty cool. I bought a bunch of them because I really love StarCraft, and I found value in that.
Would have loved some skins for our game as well. I think many would.
I suppose, and it was also a game that I wanted to support, and it helped that some of that stuff went to support the esports funds as well. So I did that. There was Nova Ops, which was a mission pack, which maybe made us think, oh, we could get more mission packs, and then the whole thing's dead, right? And what we essentially have is the team that was responsible for StarCraft and for Heroes of the Storm internally in Blizzard.
I'd love to know, let's say you create a skin pack for StarCraft, or you create a mount for World of Warcraft. Are these the same people? Because they create 3D graphics, right? And animations. And then you sell them. So that should/could be the same kind of people, right? Well, then I think it's kind of reasonable by Blizzard to put them to WoW, because they're just making a lot more money. Could be the same, could be different teams. Yeah. Could be different teams for sure. But the work is similar. When the game is monetized, it's the same team designing everything. Okay. Yeah, I mean, of course, you could go to the Hive Workshop, etc. But yeah, I can see putting the resource into WoW. That shouldn't be a surprise.
They were at Team 1, basically just gone, dissolved. Which in a way does mean, if Blizzard is to do this sort of thing again, if they are going to re-enter the RTS space.
Good point. Blizzard outsources a lot. Then you don't have a limited staff, you only have a limited budget. But even then, let's say, to use easy numbers, you can pay someone $100 to create a Marine skin, or you can pay someone $100 to create a WoW mount. Obviously, it's way more expensive. And the WoW mount will always generate more return of investment.
In many ways, they will need to rebuild from scratch. And it's one of the really sad things, because of course, Blizzard Entertainment were really a real-time strategy studio. That's the crazy thing. They just had so much success with some other games that RTSs just bled away into the background. And I suppose...
What's the timeline on this? But the release of... Obviously, StarCraft and Warcraft is RTS, but when was Diablo released? Blizzard was never really a pure RTS studio, I'd say. Heavy focus. But that was in the 90s. Yeah, Diablo 1969, right? There we go. 69 and StarCraft 1? When is StarCraft 1? 89-ish? '96? Did I say 69? Dirty mind, guys. Dirty mind. 96. StarCraft's 97. Yeah, so I guess the last time Blizzard was solely focused on RTS was 1994.
As we actually think about the RTS genre more broadly, I actually get more happy about the way that they're doing this and the amount of openness that they're showing. I mean, in all of their communications, they have been very community oriented. They have so many StarCraft 2 pros, I believe either like consulting and gameplay stuff or at the very least like doing show matches, like the one that I recently watched that was going on at DreamHack. But one of the problems we've had with RTSs actually this year is, I mean, a lot of games that have not had ideal releases.
Yes.
So we've got Company of Heroes. That had a very troubled launch, even though for my view, it was doing some exciting things with campaign, but no, between bugs and other issues, definitely it struggled. We've got Warhammer at Realms of Ruin, which does seem to be a peak Frontier developments game where it looks great, it's got some great features, some great technical stuff, but it just doesn't have the content and it feels like a minimum viable product. Of course, if you've played a lot of the games from Frontier, like Times Elite Dangerous, like say the Jurassic World Evolution, I think 1 and 2, those have had those problems as well. So this came out, I think, where a lot of people wanted Dawn of War, but for the Warhammer Fantasy, in this case, the Age of Sigmar setting. In ways you've got that, but not fully. Obviously, Total War Pharaoh, which we've talked about to death. Then we've got Star Trek Infinite, which is basically Star Trek Stellaris, that is inspired by the Star Trek Stellaris mod. And that also had a really, really troubled launch where I think a lot of people just kind of said, yeah, while the mod may have problems inherent to it being a mod, just play the mod. Thankfully, Last Train Home, sort of a different kind of game, but that's got a really good support. And also Shadow Gambit, the Cursed Crew from Studio Minimi, I believe they're called.
Yes,
by the way, you will have heard us talk about how that studio shut down. I actually just got an email.
Fun fact, former Warcraft player Korugnol was working for these guys.
Email just before this from somebody who said that actually a lot of those devs have actually found jobs locally because of another studio. So there is actually good news there. Essentially then, a lot of the problems that the likes of Star Trek Infinite, Pharaoh, Realms of Ruin, Company of Heroes 3, a lot of the problems they've had, I do not think are going to be as present in Stormgate because of the way they are developing this game. They've got a pretty robust testing schedule going for next year. And then there is just, as I look at the gameplay, I just go to Loco for my StarCraft content. It was really neat to see. This is just from his YouTube analytics that, yeah, Stormgate is actually doing really well, kind of clobbering some of that StarCraft content.
Pretty sick.
And in a way that is normal, right? Because, hey, it's the big new thing. But you see, if you're a YouTuber and you're moving, like, out of format, like if I did a Final Fantasy video on my Warcraft channel, or I even did, say, a Warcraft 3 video on my Warcraft channel, or maybe even a Warcraft 4 video on my World of Warcraft channel, if Warcraft 4 was to exist, you would sometimes struggle to get the audience over there because it's a different thing from what they're looking for. So that his inbuilt StarCraft audience has essentially one-to-one just immediately went over and accepted Stormgate as the natural continuation of StarCraft. I think that is an absolutely major thing that does show that community buy-in, of course, as does the Kickstarter. And as for watching the game itself, there are many ways in which you can clearly see that it's beta, right? Between what the observer interface looks like and a few issues like that. But I've got to say, from what just looks like the sort of performance, kind of just that Blizzard quality responsiveness, I suppose, it does seem that they have got that. Looking at the new units, actually a lot of them are really cool. They've got a really neat mechanic with trees, actually, where units who are too big cannot move through certain areas of tree. And that means that it's only really your smaller units who can use those. So that actually does a lot in the early to mid game. I think in terms of your angles of attack, that sort of thing. Later on, and actually I don't think they've implemented tier 3 units yet, but later on with some of your bigger units, they can actually be used to clear out those tree lines. And there's other examples as well. They have creep camps, which you would say is a bit of an inspiration from MOBAs, but that would be forgetting that creep camps in an RTS, that's a thing from Warcraft 3, right? So we've got creep camps here. Now, I think about some of the skirmishing that would go on in a StarCraft match, and adding creep camps on top of that actually does, that adds another dimension to map control, just in addition to, say, the sensor towers that you'd be getting in Star 2. So to me, that's also really quite interesting. There's just lots of little things that I saw, lots of little touches throughout the gameplay that to me were just like, oh, that's massaging my RTS gamer brain. And one of the other things is, this is Manav playing against TLO. Obviously, if you're watching StarCraft around the period I was, you'll know these names. Seeing the way that they are controlling units, the way that they are microing units, it looks like StarCraft, I suppose. It looks like it's...
And that's the biggest issue for Warcraft fans of course.
Got that nice, precise micromanagement gameplay. Like, in addition to everything else, here you can see, capturing a vision camp, which is one example here. You can basically see the camp is, listed as a vision camp. I think it just has, a placeholder mob on it that does a bunch of damage, but yeah, there's camps to clear. There's, a siege camp. That ends up being really cool whenever the siege camp is got. It basically spawns this, siege sort of catapult thingy unit. And what's cool about this, right, it launches that ball of energy, but immediately it tells you, exactly its radius. So it's quite, it's done quite well around counterplay. I think there are some issues around readability, which is one of the harder things to solve in a real-time
100%.
strategy game, especially as you are able to up your visual fidelity. A great example there is Warcraft 3 versus Warcraft 3 Reforged, where I think Reforged is so much less readable because of the higher detail models.
In this Bellula video, our game gets mentioned more times than on BlizzCon and the entire DreamHack combined.
The sort of slightly deviating from the original sort of art style thing that was going on in that game. But anyway, whenever I, as a StarCraft player, look at this, I'm basically seeing exactly what I would want. And I cannot wait to actually get in and play. And what this kind of means for us, the sort of StarCraft community, I don't know what it's been like for you guys, but for us it was sort of our game was put in life support. There wasn't really another thing like it out there. And it really did feel cool, well, we'll keep Legacy of the Void alive. We'll show up and watch the matches, support the teams in the pros, but there was nothing new coming from Blizzard. And now there's something new. There is a successor, and it looks like a true successor that is also smart enough to know how it can realistically be developed in the modern market. Of course, with how they are putting quite a large focus on having that multiplayer mode where you essentially have hero characters, meaning it's basically like a co-op Warcraft 3 kind of situation. Again, looks really fun. So essentially, this is one of those very rare good timeline moments from everything that I can tell. And yes, there still could be problems, absolutely. But so often in the industry, we see something get corrupted, get worse, get full of bad stuff, and the community feels like they're consistently at odds with the developer and the publisher. This seems like one of those goddamn rare instances where a startup is able to just go, make a high budget game, hyper target, exactly the sort of game, the sort of community, and just succeed. This is just peak. The developers want more StarCraft, the fans want more StarCraft. Blizzard ain't gonna do it, so goddamn it, we're gonna do it together. And that just, I don't know, that just actually makes me have a little bit of hope for the future that things like this can happen. I will be playing.
Yeah, I feel like the chance of getting scammed by anything Stormgate related is very little.
Playing in the beta. Obviously, I am biased about this, but I think, as an example, I'm also a big fan of the Total War franchise. The Total War equivalent of this is like getting a Rome 3 or a Medieval 3. That's the equivalent here. So maybe that kind of helps you understand. Or, imagine if they make a new Dead Space game, but in the same vein as the Dead Space remake, and they actually give you the good timeline version of that franchise that's unpolluted and uncorrupted. That is essentially what it kind of feels like to me, and it just feels damn good. So that's the situation. Definitely, I want to shout these guys out, get them some support, because I think, honestly, I think their heart's in the right place, and I think they're quite genuinely doing this out of a very real passion for what is, in my opinion, one of the greatest games ever made. Certainly one of the, if not the greatest, real-time strategy games ever made. Just makes me happy. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching, of course. Check out today's sponsor. There's actually some shared DNA between all of these games, considering, Warhammer and StarCraft and a lot of the inspirations going on there. And then, of course, can then carry through, into Stormgate and everything. I don't know, I just think it's kind of neat that these things lined up. Anyway, so you can check out, of course, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, who have sponsored today's video. With that said, that's it for me. For a brilliant day. I'll see you next time.
Fantastic video as always. If you're interested in something gaming related, this channel is for you. Bellula News is freaking awesome. They covered a lot of Warcraft content as well, in comparison to other gaming channels, at least. For example, they covered a bit of War 3 Champions, they covered a bit of the Reforged campaign, etc., etc. They're supporters, that's for sure. So shout out. I'm gonna spread the link. You can give them a nice little comment if you like. Well done.